the Cuban Revolution encapsulates all the previous experience in all sort of ways. That actually is being was taken by Hugo Chavez and made into a reality to start with in Venezuela, and then later on into a Latin American reality. I've read so many misleading and misinformed books about Chavez. Well, at least that's my perception anyway. When they talk about that Chavez emerged as a sort of nice guy who wanted to reform things and went into a third way period. Later on he realized this was not a good idea, it was not working, so he moved towards socialism. This is bull. You can edit that out of the film, I suppose. I've seen his, I think all of them, not all of them, maybe I don't want to claim too much, but I've seen so many of his interviews before he became the president. And there is no third way, what he said, ever. Never. Not one iota of innocence or naivety. Not one. In all the contributions, all the interviews, all the speeches that he made, is totally clear. Exactly what needs to be done. In that sense, he was an extraordinary strategic mind. He understood the dynamics of his society better than anybody else, but also he understood the dialectics of that society changing and how that linked up primarily with Cuba, secondarily with the rest of Latin America, and then the rest of the poor part of the world, and that relationship with the advanced countries, which was particularly the United States. He understood that so well. He understood something else as well, and this is a matter of major discussion, I suppose, among some in the left in Latin America, not so much today, but certainly a reflection of that you can see here in Europe. I come from Chile, and we tried the peaceful revolution, and I ended up in London eating fish and chips with vinegar. So that gives you an idea of
how bad it can be.
Things could be wrong. We did believe, I did not personally, but many people, the majority of the women did believe in this possibility. And we did try hard for 3 years. And every time, bourgeoisie, imperialism, the sabotagers, the destabilizers, the usual stuff. And we had the capacity to respond. We could have won. Just to give you an example of this, although, in history we cannot say what could have happened, but what was possible was the following. By 1977, 4 years after the coup, the El Mercurio, which is the right-wing newspaper in Chile par excellence, produced a special report of several pages, huge, with all the numbers and the rank of all the soldiers, officers, at the level of even from general all the way down, who resisted in many ways participating and supporting the coup. All of which had been either expelled from the army, imprisoned, or assassinated. 15,000. I could not believe it. When I thought that, I thought, Jesus Christ, had we known of this potential, we could have done something with it. The President Allende decided that this was not the best strategy, and he stuck to his view of a peaceful revolution. He believed that the bourgeoisie, the bulk of it, was going to respect the rules of the game. He knew that imperialism wouldn't, but he relied that the bourgeoisie locally, plus popular unity, would be a sufficient sort of de facto coalition to ensure that democracy was not destroyed. There were good reasons for this. This is not just pure ideology. Chile was a very peculiar country. I want to come back to Chavez, but this is important as a background to understand his politics. Chile had democracy from 1920 all the way to 1973. And this democracy was such that we have a popular front that lasted 14 years and industrialized the country. In Spain you have a popular front that lasted 3 years and there was a civil war and everybody was killed. In France you have something similar. In our case it lasted 14 years with the socialists and the communists in the coalition in the government. And the working class got tremendous benefit out of it. Our presidents in Chile did not have bodyguards, ever, until 1970 when we knew the US wanted to assassinate Allende, and then bodyguards began to emerge. Never before. Our presidents used to walk about in the streets and we just argue with them, or there was no aggression. We would discuss with them or applaud them, and they were totally easygoing. We did not have any problem. Elections took place as scheduled in the constitutional calendar. The Socialist Party had possibly 120,000 members, a well-organized party. The Chilean Communist Party had possibly 100,000 members. And in terms of electoral support, both parties would carry something like 25, 27, 30% of the vote. And we were even able to actually elect a president who declared himself being Marxist and wanted to actually carry out a peaceful revolution to bring about socialism. That was his program. It was explicit. So when somebody says to you, such as Allende says, look, let's stick to this, there are good material reasons to believe that. Eventually we got it wrong. We should have done something else and changed that quickly. So the reason for saying this is because the Bolivarian revolution is a form of peaceful revolution. Don't get me wrong. It's not quite peaceful as Allende's. And it's certainly not disarmed as Allende's. And the crucial difference is this. Chavez understood, which Allende didn't. Although did, but didn't do too much about it. That in order to actually bring about the socialist transformation, that is to say, a transformation that is going to last over the long period in a country, you need to transform the state. You can leave the economy for later on. In our case, we have the government. We do not have the state. And the state turned against us with a vengeance. The Supreme Court was against us, Parliament was against us, and as we know, the armed forces were definitely against us. And the result is what we know. So Chavez proceeded very quickly to transform the state by giving himself the constitutional means to actually bring about that transformation of the state, which was the Bolivarian constitution. That tells you the political genius that he was. And he did it at the moment when actually this was totally possible, politically. When he brought forward the constitution in 1999-2000 in a referendum, it was voted by 85% of the population that voted in favor of the new constitution. And in that constitution you can see the seeds of the devil that he was going to create in the whole of Latin America. That constitution de facto and de jure made neoliberalism illegal and unconstitutional. In order to nationalize, in order to privatize, I'm so biased, in order to privatize the oil state, the oil industry, you have to change the constitution and also possibly overthrow the government. So it made it very, very difficult. And it's interesting that when in 1999 he was elected with support of some sections of the bourgeoisie, he got that support. He didn't mind. He wanted to win the election. When he was going to establish his cabinet, sections of the bourgeoisie came to talk to him. He actually revealed that at some point, 2000, 2001, and told him that they wanted the Minister of Finance, the Minister of Economics, the President of the Central Bank, and the Minister of Foreign Affairs to be these, and these guys. And he told them to go somewhere else, in Venezuelan vernacular. And they did not like it. And he did not budge. That shows the mettle of the guy, that he understood that he personally played a central leadership role. Had he not taken that position at that time, one individual held everything. The future of the revolution depended very heavily on him. From that moment on, he proceeded to radicalize that society so fast. He was miles ahead of these people politically. There's no question about it. I remember in discussions 2005, 6, 7, 8, and so on over here, that there was this mass of the people that wanted to make the revolution, and Chavez, a moderate guy, did not want to actually carry it out. This is complete bull. It's not true. He was completely ahead. Sometimes he was too ahead of the population. And the question is, and this is again a very significant element of what Chavez's political genius is all about, how do you actually radicalize your society? Because on the one hand you have to actually use discourse. You have to preach to them. And you have to have a discourse which is coherent. If you start preaching, as Chavez did not do, Lenin, what's to be done, or 2 programs in Russian social democracy, or the April thesis, or whatever you want, I'm sure people are familiar. The masses are going to look at you in Latin America like, what the hell are you talking about, mate? We don't understand it. But we don't, they wouldn't. And this has been a tradition in Latin America. Every time that a political party has tried to actually be ideologically in the wrong Eurocentric sense, not that anybody rejects Marx or Lenin or any of these people, but if you try to make your discourse very Eurocentric, you isolate yourself and you lose the support of the masses don't understand you. And this has been the case. Every time you sort of indigenize your discourse, then the masses listen to you. And that's exactly what Chavez did, and this again is part of a very long held tradition in Latin America. He used 3, he said that the tree of 3 roots, 3 references, which are extremely important in the way he was able to politicize that society. It was a brilliant piece of political work. First of all is Bolivar. I've read, I think, all of the works by Bolivar myself. He wrote at the time about 10,000 letters. I haven't been able to read all of them, but I've read several of them. There are some letters which are quite substantial political programs by Bolivar. Nowhere Bolivar talks about socialism, anywhere, at all. The idea, let me put it provocatively first, the idea that Bolivar is responsible for the socialist program or basic ideas of what is being done in Venezuela is not true. However, there is enough in Bolivar for anybody to be able to recreate a Bolivar that the masses need today. Something they identify with easily because it's Bolivar, and therefore Chavez produced for them the Bolivar that they need in order to change the society they're looking for. And that is incredible. You go to Venezuela, Bolivar is absolutely everywhere. Then he discovered this other guy. He didn't discover, he knew this already, because he's an extremely well-read person, Chavez was. Somebody called Ezequiel Zamora. Ezequiel Zamora participated in a few civil wars in the 19th century, 1850-58, in Venezuela, and he was waging a struggle against land ownership, traditional land ownership. He armed the indigenous masses and the black masses, the slaves, and organized armed detachments with these people to fight for a democratic republic where there would be no land ownership and there would be no slavery. And he waged civil war for a few years. He said, that's the other one. Like Zamora, he said, that's exactly what we want. We want the indigenous population and the African people to feel free and to fight with whatever they need in order to get what they want. he didn't have to reinvent that much, because there is much more radicalism in the program of Zamora that there is in Bolivar. Even in Bolivar there is plenty. And the third one is Simón Rodríguez. Simón Rodríguez was the personal tutor. This is important of teaching. I'm a teacher, so I hope you understand my pride in this. Simón Rodríguez was the personal tutor. Bolivar was a member of the richest aristocratic family in Venezuela. And he obviously he didn't go to school. Teachers came to his house. And this guy came to teach him everything. And Simón Rodríguez happened to be a Proudhonian socialist who taught a great deal of the ideas, the radical ideas that Bolivar actually had.
You say Proudhonian?
Proudhonian, yeah, like Proudhon. Proudhon, yeah.
You might want to say who that is, just in a nutshell.
Proudhon was utopian socialist of the 19th century that Marx criticized very heavily. He believed that the moral of the working class was going to be sufficient, and the transformation of the economy came later. He was wrong, of course. So he produced this tree of the true roots, and he created this imagination and this spark in the masses. Unbelievable. And he said, democracy as we know is obviously not sufficient. We need to have participatory democracy. And he proceeded to get these people organized and provide the constitutional, legal and political means for them to organize themselves. And his legacy is for anybody to see. There are about 40,000 communal councils in Venezuela. It is a participatory democracy. 80% of these communal councils are led by women. I've seen these women myself. I wouldn't like to be on the wrong side of them. With their cap, with the Chavista t-shirt, with jeans, going around doing things, breaking eggs if necessary. And women were the people that were most excluded from society up to the point when Chavez came to office. So he has actually got the downtrodden really much on top of the situation. Then he proceeded to reform the education system in such a way that Venezuelans felt proud in some of the traditions that had been invisible from their history. The number of books, the number of magazines, the number of specialized things in culture and so on that are being produced with state support, free of charge, that Venezuelans can read about themselves, and the vindication of so many carnivals, popular carnivals from everywhere. And he's fought very hard to make sure the United Nations recognize them as heritage of humanity. Many of them are now. And it made people feel proud about their African ancestry, which it wasn't the case before. And he, on one particular occasion, the typical him, he went on television and he said, I've done this, I expropriated them from political power, I stopped their corruption, we nationalized these, we took away their land, all of these things, as he always did. And he said, but look at me, he said, my lips are fat, my nose is flat, my hair is kinky, the color of my skin is dark, he said. That's why they hate me even more. And I'm delighted to do it. So you could see that he was actually given the Venezuelan of African ancestry a new sense, and he produced a new culture in the country. There's no question about it. You go into the streets in neighborhoods and you see youth playing this very dramatic, hectic African drum, but if you dance, you'll have a heart attack. Well, if I danced, I would have a heart attack. And not merengue or cumbia or salsa, which is what they normally do. They don't stop doing the other things, but this is what they do normally. Spontaneously they go. They have identified very much. If you actually watch the revolution will not be televised, at the very beginning you see these people are dancing exactly that one. That's the African, dramatic. So there is more, but he's transformed as well. I'll move into Latin American topic. It's going too long. Then he made a key strategic political alliance with the Cubans. This does not have an organizational format. It's not like, they're going to merge their armed forces or the two parties are going to be operating together. This is not the way it works. But they understood, both of them, certainly Fidel is the one who understands most of the things, more than anybody else, anywhere, everywhere, understood the significance of having a second country join the Cuban path, as it were, of transformation, as the platform from which the rest of the continent will be transformed. And think about it. I'm not privy to any of their discussions, so I don't know. But I can guess, if Fidel were going to propose regional integration proposals, they wouldn't be taken as easily as if Chavez did it. And Chavez had this charisma, went there, pursued these people. He was persistent like hell. And he would not sleep and, pester presidents and so on until persuaded them. ALBA was established, the first document was established in 1999. The first instance of radical regional integration was in 1999. He hadn't really been a president for too long, like he already started it. And look at how much he has transformed society. I think there is a political consideration here, which comes from the experience of Allende and other experiences in Latin America. If you are on your own, it's easy for imperialism to pick on you and destroy you, as they did with Chile and with other countries, Nicaragua later on, and any other experience in the past. The only one that imperialism has not been able to actually crush was the Cuban Revolution, even though they tried in '61 and ever since. So this idea of creating the conditions for unity through institutions as well as through politics is what has worked. And that was Chavez. Chavez was the consummate regional integrationist. Unbelievable. At the time he was proposing, let's build this motorway, let's build this bridge, let's do this Telesur, television channel. The number of proposals was millions of them. He was bombarding the Latin American presidents with proposals of every kind, every day. And he would bring Venezuelan money to say, okay, here it is the money. How much you want? This is the proposal. And he kept doing it. Created a context by which later on, in 2 years, 3 years, it became totally normal. And look at it now, how Latin America is. He set up a political party, which is not like any traditional political party. But he did manage to win the armed forces to the side of the revolution, partly because he operated within the armed forces for about 15 years before he became the president. Doing clandestine revolutionary work inside the armed forces. 15 years. I've never seen intelligence services so inefficient like the ones in Venezuela. If you don't detect the guy that is going around the country trying to subvert the armed forces from within for 50 years, it means you're totally useless. We must do. And the youngs, they're the same sort of category. So he won the armed forces, and if you were to look at the state in Venezuela in 1998, and if you look at the structure of the state today, and you can see how much this has been transformed. Then there is, Bolivia, Ecuador, and all the rest of it. He used economic resources as a soft power, to use an American jargon, but for good, not for bad purposes. For example, he made deals as Venezuelan state with majorities in both El Salvador and Nicaragua, when the FSLN was not in power yet, in order to supply them with free or cheap oil, in order for them to help their poor. And he, was first it was 2, then it was 20, then it was 50, then it was 100. There were so many majorities. And the people began to realize, if you vote for these guys, you get free oil from Venezuela, man. Let's vote for them. And the transformation in terms electorally began to change. That is exactly the correct way to do it. is legitimate and it is correct. So Chavez understood that perfectly. And you know, Venezuela now has it in its tradition to do exactly the same. I just want to finish with one final point, which I have, you know, internal contradictions in my head about it. It's not the only contradiction I have in my head about things, but certainly this is one of them. He was so well read. He was a voracious reader. The only other voracious reader that we know, I mean, there are plenty of voracious readers around the place in Latin America, it was Fidel. Fidel was unbelievable, still is. And Chavez was another one of the kind. Anything political, political theory, economics, philosophy, he will be able to quote you verse and chapter. And he understood the significance, the importance of educating yourself as a political cadre in order to be able to understand not necessarily the ideology or the theory, but particularly the politics in the context when a particular book was actually produced. That was what he was interested in. So he was fundamentally a guy who understood historical context and ideology or theory as part of that particular context. Otherwise it makes no sense. And that's why he makes so much sense of everything. And this is the contradiction. Some people on the left, I'm on the left and I used to believe this, not anymore, are of the view that you have to have the right ideology in your head in order to practice the right politics. This is nonsense. Chavez believed in God. God does not exist, as far as Marxists are concerned. And a Marxist will tell you that if you have the wrong ideology, if you believe in God, you cannot have the right politics. It's not true. It's totally not true. You may have the best ideology and practice really crappy politics. So therefore, it's a political question rather than an ideological question. So, in conclusion, the legacy that Hugo Chavez has left us is just extraordinary. I don't think we should make him responsible for everything that's happening in Latin America, but he plays such an important leadership role in transforming the continent. Not just Venezuela, not just bringing about regional integration, transforming the continent. The politics, the dynamics and the dialectics of that continent is moving in the right direction literally every time, despite the problems, despite the setbacks. It's a completely new phenomenon. And if one were to take, and I'm not necessarily to discuss that, but one were to take, you know, geopolitical realities such as the rise of China and so on, and the very strong Chinese orientation of Latin America, not just of Venezuela, then it seems to me that the United States do not stand a chance. The only problem is this: as is falling quite dramatically. If I can give you a couple of elements of this. The US, the GDP of the US is 17 trillion. The US owes $18 trillion and it's growing. The US is unviable. It has 5,200 military bases. It's lunacy. It's got 800 military bases around the world. This is very expensive. It subsidizes its own agriculture to $500 billion. And it subsidizes its industry exactly at the same level. So it's a neurotic formation. It cannot continue as it is. As it's going down and China is going up, the debt of China now is 16% of their GDP, and next year it's going to be 9%. And China is going to be, at the end of this year, the country number 1 in the world, and the US is going to be number 2. And given the level of alliances, it's just amazing. And the visit of Xi Jinping, I think that's how you pronounce it, to Latin America, which is strategically deliberate. There's absolutely no question about it. If anybody thinks that it's just about business, please read again. So obviously, Latin America has the best conditions to do what it wants, and I know, because of Fidel, because of Chavez, because of Mariátegui, because of Che, because of so many, Neruda, I know that Latin America, as soon as it consolidates itself, and even before, as it's doing already, it will help, and it will assist any other continent, any continent of brothers and sisters anywhere in the world, towards anything that they want to do with their future. So our success may very much determine a nice, wonderful future for humanity. Thank you very much. Thank you, sir.